Well, it's a great day, everyone. I'm Dean Jones, President and CEO of Realogic Sotheby's International Realty, with my friend and a mentor in the economy, Matthew Gardner. Thank you for coming aboard again for this conversation.
Always welcome, my friend. Always welcome.
We are continuing our dialogue that was started just over a month ago for our 2025 Futurecast Forum. And, we've crossed over that midpoint of the year. We're at the midpoint of this decade. And, the question still remains, are we in the roaring 20s? Where is this economy going next? And you and I have identified 10 key trends that we think are worthwhile of further conversation. We were just talking a minute ago about how we met. That was in the mid-90s. You and I share a couple of distinctions. We're both from another country, and we're both grayer now than we've ever been.
Yeah, at least you've got more hair than me anymore. These things.
Oh my gosh! But the top one that comes to mind is this House Bill 1110 and the missing middle. You were quite involved in that earlier on.
Yes, I was. I can't believe that we've known each other almost 30 years. Quite remarkable. Anyway, I was. I sit on the Governor's Council of Economic Advisors, and my job under Inslee, obviously, and now a new governor, to basically poke and prod and say housing.
Right.
And so through that, we've started building up this idea of, okay, how can we address the woeful lack, quite frankly, of housing, affordability, these kinds of things, and how do we create more? When unfortunately we still suffer from actions that were taken anywhere from 1990 under growth management, or even way back to 1920s, where we actually had the first comprehensive plan put in place in the city of Seattle. So going through that, yes, did we come up with this plan ourselves? I'd like to say, yes, we did. No, we didn't. We stole it.
Yeah.
Which invariably happens. Actually, it came out of Minneapolis, Minnesota, long back in mid part of the last decade, I believe. With the view now of how do we add housing? But given when we look at what land planning is today, tends to be very centric around single family housing.
Right.
And we got an issue here in Washington State, topography.
Yeah.
Too much water, too many mountains. So how do we add to that density to bring in more housing? Because the affordability, which I know we'll talk about a bit later on, how do we solve that? Build more. It's very simple, supply and demand.
Well, and you famously said that finally zoning is catching up to the demand, and people can afford to live in less space. They can't afford to pay more than they can afford, especially with these higher for longer mortgage rates, which we'll touch on as another trend. But the math is sitting there. We're deficient about 80,000 housing units, and we'll need more than 800,000, I think, for the Puget Sound Regional Council's Vision 2050, right?
Right. That's more than 800,000. That's with all types of housing.
Okay.
Ownership housing, rental housing,
Sure.
subsidized housing, the whole gamut. But it doesn't really matter, because any way you look at that math, the math doesn't math. And so we're in a situation where we know we have a woeful shortage of housing.
Right.
Because of that, housing affordability has been impacted. We have a burgeoning demographic. And if you think about it that way, you look at the second half, the younger half of the millennials,
Right.
and then Gen Z as well. We've got a tsunami wave of demand, I would argue, for the next 15, 20 years. Are we actually keeping people from that, getting their foot on the first rung of the housing ladder?
Right. Well, and I've met a lot of investors, individual investors, that say, that makes sense to me. I'd like to put together a small fund with a few buddies and build a 4-pack or 6-pack of cottages or townhomes in infill locations in municipalities that didn't have that zoning prior. So now that's a reality that you could do this in Mercer Island or Woodinville or Mukilteo or any municipality that's a larger city.
Yes, you can. And you're right, we said earlier on, we're living in smaller spaces. In fact, household size continues to shrink. So you think about it in those terms, we need even more housing because the number of people within an individual housing unit is less. So we're still going to be playing catch up. But ultimately now you have a situation where you can look at some of these cities, some of these markets, where, yes, you can find maybe some dirt. You couldn't look at it before because it was zoned single family.
Right.
And so without a doubt, I think that if you build it, yes, they will come.
And it's going to be a make me move opportunity for some would-be sellers that might not realize what their land is worth, and the land value could have exceeded that of the improvements on the property because a developer may see, kind of gold in that backyard, if you will. So that could be a catalyst for more transactions. So give us kind of your view of the next 5 years as we finish out this decade. I mean, what would be your bet in terms of the total amount of development, either in units or in dollar volume? Because I'm trying to figure out how much additive this is going to be to the overall ecosystem of housing.
I think that if you take 1110 individually or in isolation, because we're really not going to see much other than that in the next 5 years. Why? Well, the large parcels, the master plan communities, they're done.
And where are you going to go?
And that's exactly right. So you've got the last couple, obviously down in Black Diamond and out down by Tacoma.
And up in Clay Elum, people are going east.
Sure. So you've got that. But outside of that, I mean, no more Redmond Ridges, no Kwame Ridges, or the Weyerhaeuser projects that we saw. So it's all going to be infill. We know that. Secondly, yes, it's good that we have got this zoning, but it's still going to take some time. Ultimately, 1110 is a positive, but I've always said for as long as, since we had the bill passed, it's not going to be a panacea.
Yeah.
It's not going to solve all our problems, but it's certainly going to be additive. It will help. If you think about other asset classes, well, land use types, well, high rise, which I'm sure we'll talk about, that's problematic just purely because of cost.
It doesn't pencil. And, you know, the reality, the benefits of living in city is not as strong as it once was because the walk to work situation has been resolved by the post-pandemic and work from home and hybrid work weeks. Also with the light rail, Sound Transit 3 laying down well over 100 miles of track. I mean, we are now connecting communities better than we ever have, all the way up to Everett, in fact, you know, so there's also a little bit of a gold rush of development taking place up there because of affordability.
Right.
So whether it was House Bill 1110 or just the developers' needs to build where the market is moving next, you know, I think that that is changing the landscape of where we're seeing the development and what kind of product lines that will be. But clearly, you know, more affordable housing is in great demand. You know, what I like about these 4-pack and 6-pack type style homes that might fit on a 6 or 10,000 square foot lot is they're already in the neighborhoods that have infrastructure, the grocery store, the church, you know, the walkable to a light rail line now in many cases. And so, you know, I wonder how that's going to affect NIMBYism. And you have another acronym that I thought was quite good.
We look at, certainly at Western Washington, considered to be somewhat liberal, and that's, I think, a great positive. However, as much as we would like to embrace housing for everyone, the acronym I've got, BANANA, build absolutely nothing anywhere near anything. And why do I say that? Because liberalism, in my opinion, ends at the driveway for a lot of people. For 97% of us, our home is the largest single valued asset we possess. So anything that the perception is, okay, if it's going to lower that value, oh no, I mean, don't build it next to me, build it somewhere else. And so you do get, without a doubt, some neighborhood pushback when people are starting to think about adding a more dense housing product into traditionally a single family area.
But it's going to happen, and that's why it's a mandate from the state level, and cities have to conform. Even, you know, Medina has to conform. And if they don't adopt, you know, the policies that are similar to the mandate, then, you know, they could have the overlay of state government basically saying, no, this is what you will be able to pull permits for in the future.
And that's exactly right. And that's something which jurisdictions don't want. They look at the state almost Damocles sword, because the state's saying, no, if you don't, we will.
Right.
And they don't want to go down that road. So yes, will they? Absolutely. But like anything else, we will start to continue to adopt to this new product.
Well, and the missing middle is interesting because we are now able to deliver brand new homes in neighborhoods you want to live in with the infrastructure that supports the rising population for $700,000. And, you know, these are 800, 900 square foot single family homes or DADUs and ADUs that are attached in these micro housing clusters. And the good news is it makes sense for developers. It is more affordable for first-time home buyers. I think there's a lot of parents out there that might want to liberate their couch or their basement with their child and say, let's get you on the home ownership ladder. And here's a great way, you know, matching up the products with the demand. That doesn't mean you have to be in a high-rise any longer, because those don't pencil, either for rent or for sale, in my opinion.
You're right, and they don't pencil certainly on the for sale side, because it's not just the cost to purchase it. Then you've got HOA dues and these kinds of things on top of it. Which makes it remarkably difficult. So yeah, I think that you can still say, well, you know, $700,000, $800,000, that is a lot of money, and yes, it is. But when we think about income ceiling and various other things, what we need to address, yes, we need housing across the entire income spectrum. But the missing middle, by definition, are those households making 80 to 120% of median income, the teachers, the nurses, the firefighters. And these are the ones that historically have been priced out. So the more we can help them, and in addition to that, just the first-time buyer in general, you think about, I mean, first-time buyers last year were the oldest they've ever been.
Right.
I mean, the median age was 38.
Right.
That's not supposed to be that way. So any moves we can see, and again, it's not just happening here, Oregon, California, 13 I think, states are adopting some kind of plans to increase the supply of housing because they understand that affordability across this nation, it can be addressed, but only in one way.
Well, our brokers are really excited about this because, first of all, it's a catalyst to put more transactions together where we're identifying new land opportunities on a list-back basis. Then they could represent, the 4 units or 6 units that might be developed on that parcel. And it's also providing an affordable solution for people that were otherwise having to drive to affordability. And, obviously there's been a lot of, headwinds associated with that from a lifestyle perspective. Talking to Tadashi Shiga, who's our vice president of our land division, and the partnership we have with him with his realty platform, which basically creates, using artificial intelligence and an incredible bounty of information from the developer clients that we represent, that we can see into these municipalities on what's the propensity for development and also help, put pro formas together so that would-be sellers understand what their land might be worth. And that is creating a whole new ecosystem within our development business and for brokers, because basically we need a lot more land brokers now to understand how to put these deals together.
And you're right. So I think this is not a short-sighted, it's not a short-term situation. And so I think House Bill 1110, it has legs and it's going to continue. And I'm talking for decades from now that will still be going on, hopefully even more so. So as with anything else, no one really wants to be the first in.
Right.
And that makes sense for you guys because of the fact if you can provide all that wonderful data and that very rich environment that you have in terms of data collection and assimilation, then yeah, that's going to help because I think that it's classic for developers. No one wants to be the first out.
Right.
However, once you start seeing, then you will see a snowballing effect.
Well, and it makes sense from an investor's perspective because the risk profile, especially in the state of Washington, to do high-rise condominiums that could take you 6-7 years from concept to final closing, and we know a lot can change in just a matter of a couple of years. You're in and out of these micro-housing projects probably within 24 months. I would much rather put $1 million in 250 backyards than $250 million in a single tower right now.
It's very well put. And you're absolutely right. Think about it, that's 6-7 years. As you said, from concept to closing. I think that's a bit light in my opinion. I think it would actually take longer. But that's an entire business cycle.
Right.
And so we could go with recession to recession. And so, yeah, I think that by going down that road, the appetite, I think, for most developers just isn't there. Because if it was, guess what? We'd be seeing cranes everywhere. And we are not.
Yes.
And yet we still continue to add households. We still continue to see population growth and migration to the Northwest. Now, people need to live somewhere.
It's really important for our competitiveness as well that we have that kind of inventory, because if you can't afford to live here, you're not going to want to work here, and that could be a headwind for our economy.
Oh, very, very much so. I think that there's 2 things that most businesses, entities, if they're looking into a market to expand into or to start in, 2 things they think about, one of which is there a talented workforce I can hire? Well, here in the Northwest and here in Seattle, we are wicked smart, got that one covered. The second one is how much do I have to pay people?
Right.
Biggest component of salaries, cost of living. So yeah, at what point do they say, I've got to pay people how much and not to live in a shoebox?
Right.
Well, then again, if we really want to continue to grow, which we are as a state, and we certainly need to grow revenues, well, we have to figure this part out.
Yes.
If we are not going down an appropriate road, then yeah, companies are going to start thinking, oh, maybe Washington or maybe Seattle's not for us.
Well, I think this is policy that's the right time at the right place, and it will make a material difference to our competitiveness and also to the brokerage community as well. So House Bill 1110, I think, is the right move, and we're going to be benefiting. It
is. I'm excited. It's going to be fascinating to watch how it plays out over the next several years.
So Matthew, another major trend is artificial intelligence and this concern about the job apocalypse versus the wealth that's being created by AI. What are your viewpoints?
Oh, it is a huge subject, and certainly one that's front and center and has been probably since 2022.
Yep.
So yeah, it's going to be very difficult. One, it's fascinating. This is something we've never seen before.
Right.
I think it is evolutionary to a degree that you pretty much, I've got to go back and say, last thing like the internet.
Yeah, at least.
I would guess. And so the two schools of thought. One of which is, oh no, AI is going to take over, everyone's going to be out of work, and what are we going to do? I think that that's a bit of a short-sighted way of looking at it. But right now it is still very early. And right now everyone's thinking about it. Why? Well, look at the largest corporations that we have in the nation. In fact, globally, I mean, the capex that they're spending, capital expenditures, is extraordinary.
Yeah.
So everyone is literally all in, going down that road. So therefore, because of that, yes, you get that euphoria. On the other side, yeah, will it take up or take out a lot of jobs? I think certainly it will, there's no question. But is that necessarily a bad thing? I think you have to look at the evolution as well. So yeah, it's still very early. I think that there's a lot of assumptions still being made.
Right.
Adoption levels still are not there. I think we need to go down this road a bit further before. I mean, even Morgan Stanley, for example, who said, yeah, 300,000 jobs lost globally to AI.
Right.
Well, that's 4/5 of the population of America. They then came out with another paper, I believe last week, saying, oh, the job losses might not be as bad as we had anticipated. So,
well, and from a perspective, it's also a tool that can be used to create even greater efficiencies, to perform even better. That productivity, is going to hit the bottom line and make these companies even more valuable. I mean, who could ignore? I mean, obviously, NVIDIA is benefiting from the boom because they're printing the chips that are being acquired everywhere. I mean, all the major tech titans, I think the statistic is an average of more than $10 billion per quarter being invested in this new trend. So these companies are going to look differently on the other side of this boom. And, there will be kind of reshaping of some jobs, but will the total job losses as a result ultimately be a greater impact to the wealth that's being created by these stocks that are all at meteoric highs?
You mentioned productivity. That's a great starting point because do I expect to see significant productivity gains because of AI? Absolutely. So that's good. It's good for the bottom line of companies. Therefore, it's good for their share price if they're publicly traded. So that's the positive. Is it going to make us more productive as individuals? Yes. Are we also going to see some spin-offs that are going to occur? Everyone worries. When you think about it, when you saw job losses, let's say in the early 2000s with the dot-com bust, that we saw very specifically here in Seattle. Everyone's like, oh no, this is going to be terrible. We're losing all these jobs in tech. Well, these were people that, they were laid off, but they weren't sitting on unemployment for 4 years.
Right.
They started doing other things.
Right.
And so it's very easy to say doom, gloom, and despondency in terms of job losses. But I think some of the lower skilled, more repetitive tasks, they will be done by AI more than anything else. That is going to increase productivity, but it allows people's time to start looking at other things. So whereas they were doing mundane tasks, now they can be doing something else. So I'm excited about it.
Well, if you look at the total job losses in tech, it's over 10,000 now in the last several years. But there's actually been more tech in migration from California alone in total body count from what those job losses were. So does that put us at about a neutral place in the housing market?
Yes, I would certainly say that. But again, you think about some of these tech people that were laid off, they're doing something else.
Right.
They're not squirreling money away saying, okay, what do I do now? So yeah, I'd say we're probably at a push. And certainly we continue to see that migration out of California.
Right.
California's lost population every year for the last 3 years. That's never happened in history.
Right.
And they're coming north. And this is a market and a state and a region that they're attracted to. So yeah, I'm actually at the longer term cautiously optimistic. I think there's a long way to go when you think about AI and its utilization, point one. Point two would be the power consumption, which is astronomical. And so how can that be met? You mentioned NVIDIA. Yeah, it's. I mean, certainly the numbers they reported a couple of days ago were amazing.
Yes.
I mean, revenues
It's
of
a $4 trillion company
46.
now.
Yeah, largest company in the planet. But revenues of $46 billion last quarter. I mean, it's a lot of money. However, yeah, I think that it's going to take some time. But again, looking forward, well, they're growing, but they're still excluding any sales to China. And that, well, going down a road probably a bit too deep, but I think that this is something which is not going to go away.
Right.
But it's something which I think is going to change the way we work, the way we live.
Well, and it's going to cause other
time.
demands too. I mean, obviously the Northwest is a hotbed of AI and data centers. We've got available land, we've got solar energy, we got inexpensive hydro energy in Grant County, for instance. You should see the size of the projects that are going on there. We've got all the large tech titans here. Even NVIDIA alone, I think the estimates are about 10% of their workforce, and a growing workforce, are inbound here to the Seattle Bellevue metro area. So you look at that as a wealth transfer as well,
yes,
out of California into our region, which is going to drive some housing demand.
Yeah, it will. So again, I think it's when you look at these massive shifts that we're seeing right now, it's scary. And so what it does tend to, people go down one of two roads. Either this is going to be brilliant for everyone, or this is a death spiral and it's going to be horrible for everyone. I don't see either. I think it's still early. I think that we are going to see that AI infrastructure evolve very quickly, but it's still going to take a long time before we see its complete adoption. Can it be positive for markets that have high-tech talent? And we do, there's no question about it. And so I'm pretty excited to see how this plays out. Is it going to be a huge negative for our region? No, I think it'll be a positive.
And you got to trust the leaders at these tech companies. They know what they're doing at Microsoft, at Amazon, at Meta, and so on. And they are using these tools to be a better version of themselves. Mm-hmm. And some of these companies are 30, 40 years old that became multi-trillion-dollar companies. NVIDIA did it much quicker than the average bear. But what they've all done is they've gone through massive transformative events in the industry, such as the internet itself, right? And look at them now. So I would suggest to you that if they have a trajectory of growth and that their stock values are a future predictor of where they think these economies are going, then they only see this as a benefit.
Oh, yeah, absolutely right. Said you mentioned the stock market. Yeah, I mean, stock price is what? It's based upon expectations of future earnings. That's how you set a stock value. And certainly we're at all-time highs now. And I mentioned earlier on the capital expenditures that all these major companies, the amount of money they're spending is extraordinary. Now, that's good in some respects, but also the knock-on effect, because that CapEx creates additional jobs. And so whether it's in construction, it's any plethora of different industries that will benefit from that money being spent. And it's being spent, and it's a lot.
Well, and that center of gravity is shifting north. Let's be honest. I mean, the primary market would be Silicon Valley, Santa Clara, and home to many of these large tech companies as a headquarters. But what people don't realize is that some of the largest headquartered companies in the Bay Area have massive satellite offices here because of recruiting and retention and cost of living and taxation, which we'll touch on in a minute. But I would submit that we, if not number two, are making a run for number one most impacted market by AI. So it's got to be part of the conversation in housing and, watching those trend lines before they become headlines.
I think you're absolutely right.
So 2025 is synonymous with politics and policy and, a lot of saber rattling for sure. But we got it done with this one big, beautiful bill. What are your thoughts about how consumers can look at that as setting some goalposts for their future decisions in housing?
Well, I think it's interesting when you think about the current administration. Again, they changed things very quickly.
Sure.
And what the public's perception when that occurs is, I don't know what's going to happen.
Right.
So what do we do when we don't know? We do nothing. Exactly right. You freeze in place. And so between tariffs and certainly the passage of the big bill, at least we have a direction now.
Right.
I think the concerns which we did see, which were substantial, that we were going to run straight into a recessionary wall, certainly have not seen that occur so far. So when you look at it, and no one wants to pay taxes, and any way that can be adjusted, it's going to benefit the public, not just from a transfer of wealth standpoint, which again is going to be significant over the next couple of decades. But we look at it and say, okay, well, how does this help grow the economy? How does this impact the housing market? And I think that there are enough positives that came out of that bill. I mean, the biggest one obviously is removing the sunset provision of the tax cut that was put in place under the first Trump administration.
Right, 2017.
That is correct.
And that was going to sunset in 26.
Correct.
So we had a looming change that could have dramatically increased capital gains taxes. And imagine that situation if people thought taxes were going to go up and we have an inordinate amount of equity in these single family homes that they might be downsizing. There could be a race to the counter to unload homes before the taxes go up.
Very much so. And you talk about, I mean, look at the value of real estate, of residential real estate, almost $50 trillion in the country. It's a lot of money. So if we are looking at it through the eyes of the consumer, it's removed certain obstacles that they might have been worried about in terms of their wealth and transfer of that wealth. So now those obstacles have been removed. Now the sunset clauses have gone away. Capital gains tax is a bit more understandable.
Right.
And therefore that allows people to make decisions that benefit themselves and their families, as opposed to either doing nothing or, in fact, if they hadn't seen that bill pass, then really trying to get things done before that sunset happened. So I'd see that certainly as being a positive.
And when we talk about some of these policies like the tariffs, and that's just another headwind. People don't know how that's going to affect the economy, cost of living, of course, which, meets the inflation rate, which obviously the Fed has been trying to attack with all their, consecutive rate hikes and this higher for longer inflationary environment with mortgage rates. Did we get past some of that now? I mean, obviously the stock market's rebounded. We've got this bill passed. Are the tariffs really going to play a big role, do you think, in the economy?
I think that the jury is still out on that. And why do I say that? Because the administration does tend to change things rather quickly. And so all of a sudden you've got another 90-day pause on China tariffs and a lot of different things coming into play. Latest deals to the European Union will be significant, but will that happen? So again, uncertainty is still there. Thus far, it's still a bit too early to say in terms of the impacts of tariffs on inflation. And I say that because before these tariffs came into effect, a lot of companies were pre-purchasing as much as they could.
Right.
So it's always going to take a few months before we start to see some of the impacts. Now we are slowly seeing it, and is it inflationary? Yeah, actually it is. And that's going to be a big issue for the Federal Reserve. Why? Well, as we all know, they have a dual mandate, which is full employment and price stability or stable inflation. Well, we've seen employment growth certainly slow. Well, there's been a lot of seasonal adjusting going on, so not quite sure where that is going to play out. But in general, it has been. But we have seen inflation tick up a bit. So the problem with the Fed is if inflation's high, they need to keep rates high. Am I saying they're going to? No, they won't. We will see a rate cut. We'll see a rate cut in September, I believe. The question is going to be now, how many of them? But again, you've got an administration now trying to dig its way into the front doors of the Federal Reserve. So that creates some more uncertainty.
Just fire some people and maybe you'll intimidate.
Exactly. So I think that, are we past it? I think the massive drop in equity values we saw when the tariffs were announced, and I think that was, in my opinion, very badly done, but they went down that road. They've changed a lot of them already. And so the impact has not been as significant. We saw a massive bounce back, as you mentioned, in the stock market. That's a good thing. So, but I think it's something we need to keep an eye on. But the impacts on real estate, again, yes, are going to be very significant. Why? We import a lot of materials from outside the US, certainly from Mexico, from Canada, from China. And so that just makes the cost structure to build housing go higher. That's always going to be a pass-through from the builder to the end user. So I think as much as you hear a lot of people in Washington, D.C. say, oh, yes, we want to help housing. Well, this is not exactly helping too much.
Yeah, huge premiums on Canadian lumber or technology out of China. I mean, these are not going to not be noticed on the strike price of housing, especially new construction is, slower now for those reasons. And, you also look at the deportation policies, and a lot of labor is undocumented in the construction industry. So I've heard bets of between 25 and 35% of the cost of a home between labor and foreign, created product lines that go into these housing is affected by this. I mean, could you imagine if you had to pay for twice that cost in the construction of a home? That would be more expensive, not less, to build the housing.
Well, exactly. So you could combine those materials and the labor, as you very accurately said. Yeah, I mean, we're finding, and I'm speaking to developers and builders saying, yeah, guess what? Crews aren't showing up to work because they're worried ICE is going to be there. And so the trouble is, how do you backfill that industry, the labor? It's very difficult to do. And so ultimately, does make things more expensive. I'm hopeful that there'll be enough pressure from the NAHB and other realtors associations on the federal government to say, come on, you say you want to help with one hand and you're hurting with the other hand.
Right.
So in all, I think we think about tariffs, you think about taxes, certainly. We haven't seen it play out as far as I'd like to say, okay, categorically this is going to happen. The impacts, however, have not yet been felt as severely. The question is going to be, will they? And how fast will possibly the administration pivot again to correct it? But the bottom line is on the Fed, will we see rate cuts this year? Yeah, we will. The question is going to be, I'm still saying 1, but we could see 2. But then how far down are they going to cut?
Well, I think a lot of would-be homebuyers have been waiting for this reduced cost of borrowing, and then they'll jump into the market. Do you see housing prices correcting much more in the Puget Sound region? I mean, we've certainly seen inventories rise about a third year over year. More negotiation room, perhaps, for those would-be buyers.
Yeah, I think it's fascinating here, certainly. You mentioned supply. Is supply high? Yeah, you're right, but I think people are looking at it in the wrong way, quite frankly. Now, we had historically low levels of inventory. We pulled a lot of demand forward coming out of COVID, which we knew because people were moving, remote working, these kinds of things. So when you put demand forward, you're always going to see a slowdown. Now you've also got a lot of people not stuck. Golden handcuffs, remarkably low mortgage rates. Why would they give that up? They're not moving. Now, we have seen inventory levels rise, but I always tell people, certainly in the Puget Sound region, I say this to brokers a lot, don't look at where we were a year ago. Compare where you are now with the same month in 2019.
Right.
Why then? Well, that's the last, quote, normal year we've had. And so, is it high? No, in fact, in the Puget Sound region, we're still down in terms of overall supply, certainly of new listings. So is it a terrible thing? No, I think that brokers tend to go from the feast to famine mentality. But it's an increase, but in terms of prices needed to soften. In terms of pricing, do we need to see prices soften? Yeah, I think, again, affordability. Think about it here in King County, the entire county. Median sale price last year, almost $1 million.
Right.
And that's the entire county. We're not talking about Hunts Point or Medina.
Right.
So if you look at it there, yeah, we will see a slowdown. Again, interest rates have impacted that substantially, given the fact when the Fed really stopped supporting the mortgage market by buying, they don't set mortgage rates, but by buying mortgage-backed securities, then yeah, we saw rates double in less than 9 months from a historic, never seen before, likely never seen again low to where we are, we hit above 7%. So that impacts buyers' abilities. For every 1 percentage point increase in mortgage rates, for the same mortgage payment, they can buy 10% less house.
Right.
Just math.
And conversely, it goes the other way around. We drop a point, which might be possible in the total Federal Reserve reactions by the end of 2026. I mean, I'm not sure where we're going to go, despite all of the rhetoric of recent. It sounds like September we're going to see a correction.
We will see a rate cut, you mean?
Yes.
Right. Yeah. The Fed does not set. The Fed funds rate is the overnight lending rate between banks, so they don't. But does it have certain impacts? Yes.
Sure.
You got to look at the yield on 10-year treasuries. That is really the crux of how mortgage rates are set. So look at where we are now, and today we're down 4.2 roughly on that. So can I see rates drop down from where they are today? Well, we're knocking around 6.5%,
right,
give or take, and have been there for a while. Yeah, I think that we will be down probably a little bit closer to 6 from where we are today by the end of the year. However, brokers or indeed their clients, if they're waiting for 3% mortgages, don't do that because we're not going to see it.
Right.
I think the long term, what's called the terminal rate for mortgages, for the 30-year mortgage rate, it's going to be seesawing either side of 6%.
So get used to it.
Yeah.
And plan accordingly.
And there's a very straightforward, very significant reason for that. It's our debt level as a country.
Okay.
And so we have to service that debt. And we do that by issuing more debt. And so countries or buyers of those securities, they're going to want a decent return on them. So have we been used to, or did we get used to, historically low rates through COVID? Yeah. But if you think about it over time, from the 80s going onwards, we kept on seeing rates drop by decade. We averaged in the 12s in the 90s and in the 9s in the 2000s and down. It can't go down to zero.
Right.
So I think,
those days are well in our past.
Correct. And so I think if you think about it, I'm not saying they can never go down below that 6% threshold. If we have a recession, absolutely they can. But again, that long-term rate, it's going to be high fives, low sixes is my expectation. That will obviously act as a bit of a headwind to home price growth. Not necessarily a bad thing. But yeah, we need to get used to it. I just don't see us ever getting back to those halcyon days in 2022 when 30-year fixed rate mortgages were down 3%.
Well, we have to remember too, for all those buyers that are waiting for a sharper rate or hoping for this perfect world of better buy and lower rate, the reality is you can't rebuy, but you can always refi. So you got to jump in at some point if you want to be a homeowner. And at least these last couple of years, we have watched median home prices in the region rise significantly year over year. And it seems like it's plateaued a little bit right now because we have higher inventory levels, especially here in King County. But the notion that it's going to go backwards, over the next couple of years doesn't seem to be holding water in terms of the median home prices.
And it doesn't. Again, you also think about it. Yes, if you see rates go down, that's good. But over that same time period, if prices have gone up, one could quite possibly be offsetting the other.
Correct.
So, yeah, I think, again, buy what you can afford. You don't over leverage, don't overstretch. But if you are if you're a broker advising your clients, or indeed the potential buyer themselves, if you're just sat waiting for rates to plummet again, you'll be sat waiting for a very long time.
Well, that brings up another trend, which is these abundant number of renters that are in our market. I think the city of Seattle still has more renters than it does have homeowners in it. And we must just be teeming with, well-heeled millennial tech workers, to pick out one demographic, that are perpetually renting instead of owning. And it dawns on me that with this House Bill 1110 we talked about earlier, delivering more inventory and more affordable price points, with the lower mortgage rates that it sounds like you're anticipating here beginning in September, we could start to see a migration of renters becoming more heeled to buy.
Yeah, again, we've created this situation today, forced renters. Yes, they are getting older. And we know millennials, they tend to get involved into real relationships a bit later than you or I did. But without aging us. But I think that if they do that, creating new households, starting families.
Yep.
They're going to be looking now. So that is the demographic. Again, that's part of that wave that we're going to see of would-be first-time buyers. And they are out there. And as we look at, because you mentioned Seattle, yes, more than half of the city do rent as opposed to own. So I really think we've got a lot who are sat waiting to get into a situation whereby they know that it just does make sense to buy, as opposed to continue to rent, where what happens with your rent continues to go up. You think about it this way: if you own your home, well, hopefully over time your income goes up, but guess what? Your mortgage payment doesn't.
Right.
So the share of your income dedicated to a mortgage payment actually goes down, in addition to the tax benefits of owning. So this is not lost on them.
Yeah, there's no place like own, right? I mean, at the end of the day, it's still been a core wealth driver for Americans and globally. And, the only possible way to get onto that ladder is to start and take that first step.
Absolutely. And you can paint your walls whatever color you want.
Well, now we have, the SALT deductions that are confirmed. And I think we've got better guardrails from some of the government policies that some people are waiting on. The stock portfolios look healthy. These restricted stock units, which is a form of compensation that a lot of the tech workers are receiving, are pretty flush right now.
Yes.
those accounts. So you do have to consider as a would-be buyer that you are competing in a relatively finite amount of options. And I can tell you from our experience in city, to go on to another trend, is the high-rise construction of condominiums and even apartments is definitely flatline right now. I mean, we haven't had a groundbreaking for a high-rise for sale property since 2020, and based on the math I'm looking at, they probably won't pencil for another 5 years.
I think you're absolutely right. A couple of things come into play. You mentioned supply, new construction. We know how expensive it is. And again, we look at the market, very easy to tell what's going on, what's in the mindset of developers. If they're not putting cranes up, then they know that it doesn't make sense.
Right.
So they are really the ones that are going to be directing the market or their perception of it. So very little in the way of new construction because of price, as you said, as well as time. Same way as you mentioned with apartments. We got overbuilt, that has flatlined as well. But what's more interesting to me is that going through COVID, we saw that migration out of the city.
That's right.
We saw massive growth in city. Why? Well, going back the last couple of decades, well, there's a value to our time. We will pay more to live closer to where we need to be, in addition to the cultural, social amenities that an urban market offers. Well, through COVID, the opposite happened. Remote working. So we actually saw that drive to buy occur again.
Right.
I can live further out. Okay, if I don't have to come into the office at all, or even if it's a couple of days a week,
right.
Well, then, I'll put up with a lousy commute. And so we've seen a exponential downside in terms of the impact of COVID on urban housing prices. Yeah, I mean, the urban condo market got hit very hard. Is it bottoming out now? I think that it is.
I do too.
But at a price level now, I think it's compelling. Now, I'm not saying that we're going to see prices double in the next 12 months or anything like it.
Right.
However, I don't think they're going to go down further. I think we've bottomed out. So I think this is actually a very good opportunity for buyers to get in now at a price point which you just would not have seen had it not been for COVID.
Well, and those folks that moved out to a salmon stream are sometimes moving back in. I mean, the mandates to work, whether it's Amazon or other tech employment, are wanting to see more of their staff in the office. And there is a tremendous overhang of commercial office space, which we should touch on, because is that a negative thing? Probably not great to be a landlord, but is it a good thing for new startup companies and venture capitalists to invest in the next Amazon that doesn't have to start in a garage? It can start in a Class A office building at pennies on the dollar.
Yeah, it's not good to be a landlord, not good to be a bank either, in that respect. We've seen massive cuts on valuations of commercial space because of how the value of an office building is calculated. It's based upon rent and occupancy.
Sure.
So it's a great cap rate. So based upon that, yeah, we are certainly going to see some transactions at very, very low prices, I think, in the commercial side. That will then potentially allow somebody or an entity to buy that building to then, before they bring it back to market, make changes. We've got a lot of employees now saying, okay, I get going back to the office, but I want you to do this, that, and the other. So I think you can do that at a low price point. And I think at the same time, you've got businesses moving in who obviously are rate conscious. If you can get back in, you're not paying $60, $70 a square foot in rent, well, then, it can make sense. And that, as you mentioned earlier, I think it's going to be another genesis that's going to allow people to say, okay, I'm going to be back in the office. I know that. The office is a place I don't mind being now because of the changes that were made to it. Yeah, maybe it's time to take another look at the urban market. So out of all the asset classes, I'd say both residential and commercial, I'm most excited about the urban condo market. I think that that's one over the longer term. I think it's going to do remarkably well.
Well, so are buyers. I mean, we are seeing a bottom-up, acquisition trend at some of the later developments that had the most inventory, and that's a lot of them are the infill renters that are becoming first-time home buyers. People that moved out are now moving back in. They understand the trends. You can see it on 520, I-90, I-5 when when you see the traffic increases year over year because downtown's daytime population is resurging. It's still only about 2/3 of what it was before the pandemic, but we have that runway to grow now because we have the housing, we have the job growth, we have the inventory of office space, great advancements made along the waterfront and the convention center. These are all multi-billion-dollar investments into the vitality of downtown. And, we'll see how it plays out with the mayor's race. There has been great improvements and strides made about security and intervention, with some of the social problems that downtown has faced. And a lot of the West Coast gateway cities have faced these problems.
Again, you mentioned traffic. I said I was coming into Seattle yesterday, rush hour, and come from the north end. Remarkable. I mean, the traffic really didn't free up until north of Everett. So we are seeing people come back into the office. That is only going to continue. No question about it. Are there still issues downtown? Yeah, I think it would be remiss, as you mentioned, say, there are certainly problems still, and there are more overhangs, I would argue, from council members who are no longer in City Hall. The grand experiment did not work, and so those still need to be addressed. Are efforts being made? Sure. Is it better now than it was? Absolutely.
Yes.
More inroads need to be made, but again, that's going to be additive in terms of what overall demand for urban residences, as that will continue to get better. And that's going to continue to add more people looking at downtown in a different way. We're going to start seeing some more retail come back into our urban market. That again is very important in terms of residents. Exactly.
Well, you mentioned, we were a very fast-growing city for the last 2 decades. I know from 2010, we were very active also in the high-rise space, and there were over 40,000 multifamily housing units that were delivered within walking distance of each other. And, the majority, actually 94%, was built for rent, not for sale, which is a whole other policy conversation about the Condominium Act and the risk profile for developers. But I say that because there are 4 or 5 premier condominium towers that were delivered, and there's less than 500 units unsold now. For the first time in literally more than a decade, we are finding ourselves in this dearth of new condominium supply. You're saying buy the dip. Give us some perspective on where the new construction costs are and what you would need to see in a pre-sale value to pencil a new condominium tower today.
As we keep on coming back to the fact that we're not seeing any cranes downtown.
You're right. There's a reason.
The conversations that I've had and some math that I've done on the back of an envelope, I think today, all in, new construction type one high-rise building, you've got to be looking easily at over $1,800 a square foot to build it.
Right.
Over time, unless you're selling those for well in excess of $2,000 a square foot, you're not making any money.
Right.
And so now that's 500 square foot for $1 million. That's pretty rare air. So I think, we're not seeing it because builders know what they do, and they are been put on this planet to do one thing: to build housing. If they're not, there's a reason why they're not.
Right.
Because they're not making money if they're not building.
Yeah.
And they're looking at the numbers the same way I am, and it just does not make sense for them to go ahead. So you've got very few, as you mentioned, units in the premier buildings that were delivered. That's is a good thing. So we're not seeing additional supply.
Yep.
Unlikely to, as we've said already. We're not going to see much more in the way of supply, and I think you're right. I'd be surprised if any new project breaks ground before 2030.
Well, and the average sales price of new construction of recent years is between $950 and $1,100 per square foot, depending on which building that you're looking at. And if the replacement cost is nearly twice that, you can see what needs to happen in the resale market and for pre-sales to benefit by new towers. The prices have to go up. So if we don't feel like prices are eroding further after this correction and people are coming back downtown, the supply is finite, what you see is what you get for inventory, then it's a pretty safe place to make an investment and ride that next wave.
I think you're absolutely right. I tend to not look so often at sale prices. I tend to look at list prices because sale prices are a lagging indicator. That was the world of 3 months ago, or where rates were that 4 months ago.
Sure.
Okay. What people are asking, that's the view of the future. We saw significant declines that pace of drop in list prices certainly is over in a lot of markets. And so that, I think, is the first thing anyone wants to see. If all of a sudden transactions are occurring, which we know they are, prices have been set or reset, well, then it's only going to be upwards from here.
Well, and you look at San Francisco as a harbinger of things to come for Seattle sometimes, and they're seeing reinvestment in commercial because it's reset values, and new companies are obviously riding some of the wave with AI, like we talked about earlier, and housing has followed, and we're seeing the same in Manhattan and, and now in Seattle.
Yeah, and actually I was giving a speech in Manhattan a few weeks ago, and brokers there were saying very much the same thing. They haven't really gone anywhere for the last 3 years price-wise. Now it's starting to see things kick into gear again. And those are some pretty heady prices when you think about condos, certainly down the financial district. So if you're seeing it there, yes, the Bay Area certainly hit very, very hard. Affordability is worse than we see here. Similar social problems. In fact, I'd say they're worse there than they are here. But ultimately, when you add all these different components together, of the return to work, of a reset of pricing, of where mortgage rates are going, and of the desire and a reemergence of downtown, checks a lot of boxes that people need to have checked before they say, okay, yeah, now it's time for me to jump in.
So you're not betting against Seattle?
People have bet against Seattle for decades, and guess what? They've always been wrong.
So another trend picking up from the FutureCast Forum is the silver tsunami and the great wealth transfer. The numbers are staggering: $90 trillion in inheritance and wealth preservation tactics through all kinds of tax deferral strategies. How do you feel that's going to play out in the Seattle Bellevue metro area over the next 10 years? Like, what kind of shifts will we see in housing as a result?
Oh, it's going to be huge. The numbers are astronomical. If you think about it here, again, we have a lot of very, very wealthy people.
Yes.
Well, a lot of very, very large companies. And so I look at that transfer of wealth that we're going to see, we know is going to happen between older, even to maybe us, and generations that are younger. And I think that we will see a lot of that occur possibly earlier than you might think. And why do I say that? Again, when we start trying to offset taxes, how do you try adjustments you can make yourself in order to try and preserve that wealth, not for yourself, but for your children, for example, whether it's going to come in the form of helping for down payments on a home, maybe buying a home.
Yes.
And so I think that we will continue to see that, as much as we are living longer, and so we're not going to see it happen overnight, but we are in a very wealthy market. And as Peter always said, Washington State is a great place to live in. Just don't die here, because of taxes. So more you can actually remove yourself from the worry of that by trying to plan for it and make some of those transfers earlier, then I think that's going to be beneficial, not just to the overall economy, but certainly in the housing part of our very wealthy region.
Yeah. Well, and talk to your accountant and to your wealth manager, but as in essence now with some of these government policies landed, and you can certainly take advantage of making warm gifts to your children that might help them get into home ownership. And also, as the aging demographics are looking at a 6-bedroom home on, a half-acre lot with a lot of maintenance, and you're in your 70s or 80s, the reality is the utility of a home like that might not be your forever situation. And so there will be a downsizing likely. You said also for estate tax purposes in the state of Washington, probably a trend to pick up another home, maybe in Arizona or in Florida. These are the trends that are going to be affecting our market, and also recycling housing for the next families to jump into that 6-bedroom home.
Oh, very much so. And again, we think about those demographic shifts. You mentioned Arizona or Florida. Well, we've seen that migration pattern actually come from the south to the north. I'm not sure if you noticed or not, the weather's kind of getting a bit better up here in the Pacific Northwest.
Yes.
And so that is fascinating unto itself, because everyone said, oh, Seattle, it rains all the time. Maybe that was a couple of decades ago, not anymore. So you're also seeing money come out of those southern states into our region.
Right.
And they're bringing their money with them. So yes, we will see a downsizing, but don't necessarily believe that the old days, sell your house in Bellevue, buy a house in Yuma, Arizona, is going to continue. Yes, we will see some of that happening, but climate is starting to have an impact, as well as not just taxes, but also you think about insurance and home insurance,
Right.
especially in Florida, California.
Yeah.
That is becoming part of that decision-making process. So ultimately, yes, of course, go and talk to your tax advisor or your accountant before making any of these decisions. But I certainly see that wealth transfer be more pronounced here in the Northwest than we'll likely see, let's say, the center part of the country.
Well, and that tremendous wealth that is being created here, not just in equity from their homes, that they're probably have no mortgage now anyways, and they're going to roll that into maybe a downsized home and a second home somewhere else. But it's also commercial portfolio as well. They have a lifestyle change. They don't want to be the landlord as long as they have been. They're looking at 1031 exchange strategies or 721 exchange strategies for capital gains tax deferral, but ultimately they're going to sell the strip mall, the motel, the apartment house, the multiple single family homes that they've been renting out over the years, because they want to divest from being an active investor into more of a passive one and trying to not pay tax along the way.
And that's huge, as you mentioned, especially on the single family rental side. Everyone assumes that it's these huge corporations that bought everything up coming out of the financial crisis, they're to blame for the housing shortage. No, that's not the case at all. It is the mom and pop investor. In fact, these large corporations that have more than 100 units, they're almost a rounding error. They own less than 1% of single family rentals. So it is the mom and pops, it is the people we're talking about, and they're the ones that are going to say, okay, I've done very well, now it's time to sell those on. So again, that is just more money coming in. And what do they do with it? Certainly 1031 exchanges, yeah, absolutely. Try and defer that huge amount of income, which I'm sure they've seen. But that's just another part of the bigger picture. You start talking about strip malls, certainly, or apartment buildings. Single family rentals, that is going to be a huge player, I think, over the course of the next probably a couple of decades.
So someone going through estate planning, they are going to have numerous types of transactions. I know our brokers are really well positioned for that, and we have some commercial agents as well that partner with them to help them with those other transactions that are not residential. And also, being interstate and international, if they do want to have a second home or multiple properties, maybe one on the south side of France, we're able to help them that way because it's really a lifestyle investment. They are in the sunset of their life and they're enjoying their wealth and they're traveling the world and they're living in multiple different locations, and there's a lot of transactions that are happening on this great wealth transfer.
Oh, absolutely. And again, this is not just a blip. This is something we're going to see, I would say, for at least 20, maybe 30 years. So it's not going away.
And you look at this demographic of the great generation and the baby boomers, I don't know that there's ever been decade after decade growth in these portfolios and the wealth that has been generated, not just in housing, but in the stock markets and other equities, that has an enormous, $90 trillion says it all.
And it does. And again, you're right. We haven't seen it really ever. You can go back to the Gilded Age, late part of the 1800s, but that's probably not a good place to go because we had some pretty bad recessions that occurred then as well. But yeah, I think that the run-up has not in isolation. It really, I would say, started lightly in the 70s. Oh, you could even go back to the end of World War II. But bottom line is that over time, assets appreciated, incomes have risen. Certainly the equity markets are, every day it seems to me that it's breaking a new record. That's a lot of money out there.
It sure is. And it looks like our state government wants a piece of that with their attempts on the wealth tax here. And obviously we now have our excise tax on equities. It's excluding real estate. So thankfully that got included as a carve out. But, what's the math? $250,000 sales or more in capital gains, you will pay 7% to the state.
Yes.
And if it's over $1 million, you will pay 9.9%.
Correct. Yeah, it is a lot. And mainly the reason for that is that we have a requirement in Washington State to have a balanced budget. You have to have it. And we have a massive budget deficit going on. Money's got to come from somewhere. You either cut services or you increase taxes. And that certainly is what the administration here in the state has to do. Not a case that they're doing it because they want to do it. They've got no choice. And so because we have that big shortfall in Olympia, and yeah, you've got to go somewhere. And so, yeah, that then comes into play as to how are people going to address it. And again, those deferral strategies that we've already talked about to, say, get around it. But again, it's that wealth preservation. Because I'm afraid that until we see a situation changing in Olympia, until we actually get into a budget surplus rather than deficit, these things are still going to be in place for quite some time.
Well, we've been the evergreen state, famously it's easier to make money and keep the money here, and these excise taxes don't help that argument, but they're still more favorable than California.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And again, so people are looking at where they want to spend their time in retirement, whether it be here in the US or overseas. Again, they're looking at different states. Where's a good place for me to be? Both from a climate standpoint, from a tax standpoint, from a lifestyle standpoint.
Yeah.
People still look at the Northwest as saying, yeah, I kind of like it up there.
It was tragic what happened in the LA fires, and obviously I'm not sure what is the future, given that some of those homes could not be replaced, given entitlements would be nearly impossible to rebuild over the water, for instance.
Billions and billions of dollars. Similar situation, actually. I just got back from Maui a couple of weeks ago. I was there for the 2-year anniversary of the fires that occurred there. Seeing a lot of parcels that, yes, they've been cleaned of debris, but they have not been rebuilt, certainly not close to the water, and it's taking 14, 16 months to get a permit. It's going to be very hard. And again, in California, same thing's applying there. We're not going to see everything be rebuilt, there's no question about it. But then what does get rebuilt, well, what are insurance premiums going to be? People are just getting tired because of the climate change we're seeing, of fires, of floods, of landslides, of mudslides. Is it a place they want to be anymore?
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly devastating, but one of the trends that we've seen are an inbound group of Californians that are choosing to rebuild their lives here just because of the weather pattern changes and taxation as well, and overall lifestyle. I mean, the Northwest is receiving some of that demand.
Oh, very much so. And I think, is that going to slow down? Well, it probably will, again, because of COVID, it kind of messed things up quite a lot. But that migration, rather than going from the center of America out to the coast, which is what we've always seen, now we're seeing it from the south to the north. Now, Texas, obviously, a bit of an exception in that respect, but we've seen a slowdown there, no doubt, in terms of in-migration. But yeah, I think that people are now looking at a number of the northern states as places they want to be. And from a finance, from a tech standpoint, from an employment standpoint, well, you can look at Seattle more than you will, say, look at Boise, Idaho.
Right. And if you're going to rebuild, you can choose where to do so. And so changing states, seems to be in vogue there. And in talking to some of our home builders, the custom home building industry, which is another trend that we see on the rise because of the wealth here and because of lifestyle and design preferences, homes don't look the way they looked 20 or 30 years ago, the utility of them. And as a result, we're seeing a whole fresh set of designs and increasing demand for custom home building.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I think so. Basically, how things sort of work in a circle. You can go back to homes built in the 70s, 80s, even the 90s. Obligatory, you had to have your study there. And then, of course, no one was using them, and therefore they weren't being built. But now, because of work from home, a dedicated workspace is more important now than we've seen in 30 plus years. Also outdoor spaces, again, because of the pandemic, they are being more formalized now. And so a lot more money being spent outside. And again, look at the weather. And so those changes in terms of custom building, people's needs without a doubt have evolved, have changed, I think in a good way. And people can say, no, they will have to cut out a certain number of existing homes from a possibility of buying because it just does not tick all those boxes. Therefore, custom construction, really, I think we're going to see more and more of it.
Well, and also they're great investments because you can buy a property that might have lost its utility because it has, 7.5-foot ceilings, or it doesn't have air conditioning, or, it needs a multi-million-dollar facelift to be marketable. It effectively becomes land value. So you can buy that in a great location, in a great school district where there's going to be present demand, and you can build a new construction home and create a unicorn property, in these existing neighborhoods that are going to be worth 4 times, 5 times what that other home was.
Correct.
Yeah, which recovers all of your investment in, the sticks and drywall and glass and fixtures. And it seems like there's a real premium that you could acquire when you have a very well-designed move-in ready house, whether it's for yourself or for investment purposes.
Oh, absolutely. Again, buyers now more picky than we've seen before. So again, this house, any house, has to really meet all their criteria. But if it does, they will pay for it. There's no doubt about it.
So, Matthew, one of the things that brought our development company to Seattle metro area from Vancouver, BC, is we saw similar trends manifesting from foreign direct investment, the urbanization of downtown Seattle into what we saw in Vancouver. But something that was notably lacking was no subway, no light rail strategy until Sound Transit 3 came along. Massive multi-billion-dollar investment connecting many of our ex-urban locations to the urban cores. And it's interesting because we've talked before that we came close to having a subway system, didn't we, in the early 70s in Seattle?
Oh, yes, we did. It's funny. It's twice, I believe, we've actually had the opportunity to create a entire infrastructure paid for by the federal government. What do? We voted it down. And so, in fact, if you've ever been to Atlanta, you've traveled on MARTA, their mass transit infrastructure they have there, every dollar that paid for that should have been ours. But we said no to it. Atlanta said yes to it.
So I see a similar trend too, because you go to Vancouver, BC in Expo 86, they completed, what's the beginning of the SkyTrain system, which is today still in operation. Do you know that everywhere that their SkyTrain has a station has now been upzoned substantially, like Metrotown and New Westminster and so on and so forth? These are like vertical villages centered around light rail. And it's similar in Europe, isn't it?
Oh, very much so. And that's the thing about Europe. We've been living there in cities a bit longer than you have down here in the US. And we're used to it. And we're used to that density. It's still a bit foreign, certainly further west you come in the United States. Yes, they're used to it in New York, let's say, and Boston, not so much here. But that changed over the course of the last, again, 30, 40 years. And to a little bit more than having the monorail.
Right.
Put it at the World's Fair. Great 90-second trip, but that's literally all it was. So with SD3 and with the infrastructure that has been put in place, is it a positive? Absolutely it is. I mean, however, being an economist, I'd have to say they could have done better. I think the station area overlays were not broad enough. I don't think they were high enough. And again, this goes back to neighborhoods saying, no, we don't want it. So lost opportunity to a degree, but what we have seen built there, it is very good. I think it's only going to continue to grow over the next probably 20 years.
Absolutely. And look at the station at 130th in the Bell-Red corridor. Not as many NIMBYs there because they're obviously more of an industrial environment. But now there's, 6, 8-story apartment, condominium, multiplex developments. And I look at this light rail line like an adrenaline shot into some of these communities. And now, we're within a decade of seeing that in Snohomish County, the city of Everett. I know Everett has been compared to be the Brooklyn of Seattle. If you look at the impact, in part because it's hip and it's affordable, right, and you have a connection, right? I mean, can you speak to where we might also see some real growth of residential demand and prosperity as a result of the Sound Transit 3?
Well, as you mentioned, again, tying in the major employment centers. Again, part of the topography, part of the issue we have here in Western Washington, certainly here in King County, is that we haven't got that much land.
Right.
And so for what we've seen over the course of a long time is we've had nodes set up. So you have Seattle, and then after Seattle, Bellevue, and then to the north, Everett, to the south, Tacoma. Because of that, you can't just have that massive 10 million person metropolis that is, let's say, New York City. So because of that, again, connecting is going to be very important. You mentioned going out the Bell-Red corridor, absolutely, to Bellevue, ultimately to Microsoft in Redmond, and that is where your adrenaline, the veins, let's, for want of a better word, are going to go. So you mentioned going up to Everett. Yeah, I think we'll see that. Down to Tacoma, absolutely. So it really is going to tie in these major employment centers. Now, as you do that, and again, as you saw up in Vancouver, and as we see, if you think about London, but it's broader because of, let's say, the underground, you can have a web of movement, and you can actually get around efficiently. And that's,
right.
That actually, when we argue or bemoan the fact of a lack of land. Well, if you can move people around effectively and quickly, guess what? That can open up more land.
Well, speaking of that, I look at what I refer to as the Upper East Side, Cle Elum, Kittitas County, moving into Grant County, and so forth. I mean, that I-90 connection is super important. People love the 300 days of sunshine. You know, it can be a weekend decision to go there as long as you don't hit a snowstorm or a snarl on I-90 at the pass. So why is this a benefit now? Because of that eastern expansion of the I-90 investment. Again, $1 billion+ infrastructure change that I think will have the unintended effect of making it more accessible to get to Cle Elum, you know, within 90 minutes, or to get to Eastern Washington sunshine destinations.
And you're absolutely right. And certainly Cle Elum is a great example. And we're already seeing it, let's say, in Spokane. And again, that is starting to burgeon, starting to grow. And as it grows, we mentioned the different nodes, it in turn is having its own issues, actually, with affordability. They need to be building more. So again, you do have growing pains. And that, I think, in essence, is what we continue to see here in Western Washington and have seen for quite some time. We are growing. And so because of that, we're not going just the direction of one particular company, let's say Boeing or
Right.
Microsoft. And that, see that growth, see that expenditure, see that investment by the state and by the federal government in our infrastructure. That is going to create additional nodes. And as you see those lines of mass transit, development along them is what you're going to see more and more of.
Well, history will repeat itself, just like a similar $1 billion investment straightened out the Highway 99, the ski to sky highway north of Vancouver to Whistler
Yes.
for the 2010 Olympic Games. And what do you think happened? You sprinkle in all that global attention on top of a new, improved and safe corridor for transportation. The city of Squamish, which was perfectly centered in between Vancouver and Whistler, has absolutely boomed.
Yep.
And I think similar things could be in store for Cle Elum and some other markets that are burgeoning because of these transportation corridors.
I think you're absolutely right.
What about moving west? I mean, we have these fast ferries now. I mean, Kingston, you can get to downtown Seattle in about 40 minutes on the fast ferry. You know, I think there could be further expansion of that kind of systems into, you know, other markets in Kitsap County, and it's more affordable.
Yeah, and certainly Kitsap County is a great example of it. Passenger-only ferries, certainly coming into Seattle, great. We know, obviously, because of Bremerton, all of a sudden it's not an hour on a ferry, it's half an hour.
Right.
It would be nice if they didn't break down as frequently as they do.
Right.
But ultimately, I'm sure that will at some point get fixed. But yeah, without a doubt, if you go into Kitsap County, and certainly those Kingstons you mentioned, but then in Paulsboro, Silverdale, I mean, there are a lot of other markets, and certainly Bremerton, historically kind of almost ignored, nothing other than Navy, right?
Right.
That's the consideration.
Not longer.
No, not longer. And they spent a lot of money on the waterfront redevelopment there, a huge amount of money a couple of decades ago. So I think that's one that is prime, it's waiting. Timing hasn't been that good thus far, but ultimately start seeing more of that infrastructure, but interconnectivity between the market here, let's say, and there, the ability to move around. Yeah, without a doubt, that's going to release, again, more land because we're not going to make any more land.
So what are the next markets to matter? I mean, I love what they're doing at Point Ruston, obviously had its challenges, but I think that final crescendo is going to be extraordinary as a lifestyle destination. You look at relative values compared to the central Puget Sound area or north to, say, Bellingham Bay along the waterfront there. The kind of reinvestment like you saw in the city of Everett's waterfront is now playing out in Bellingham Bay. And these are markets that have all the other infrastructure that you could ever want, especially for retirees that are looking for lifestyle.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, Bellingham, again, everyone thinks out Bellingham, got a university, go Vikings, but it's but up there, Deepwater Bay, which is important business-wise, certainly. Rail routes, yeah.
International airport,
exactly.
Costco, hospitals, access to the San Juans.
So I would definitely say Bellingham is one which I would be keeping an eye on. Tacoma as well, down
Sure.
maybe
Absolutely.
into Lewis County as well. They're not just but Pierce County, then obviously dropping south down to Thurston County and Lewis. We'll see. I think we'll see more activity occurring there, and I would argue that maybe not soon, but go out to the coast, Grays Harbor County, Clallam County. I think there are markets there which offer opportunity. It's going to have to be the right deal for anyone. But I think over time, and again, knowing the fact that there is no political will to change our growth management boundaries. So we know we have the urban growth boundaries where you can build, where you cannot. Expanding them is one way, but I just don't see that happening.
I'm excited about, the rebirth of some of these towns too. Like look
Yes.
at Port Gamble and their
Oh,
plans.
yes.
I mean, it's accessible, it's going to be affordable, and it is absolutely bespoke, sense of living and community and legacy, really. And it's going to have a whole new chapter ahead.
There's no question about it. And they've been working on that for a very, very long time. Coming to fruition, I'm sure, in the next few years, or starting to come into
that's
fruition.
right.
Yeah, we will see these nodes. And again, so you don't have to think of it as being just the individual larger cities, but smaller markets. Demographics will drive it, affordability will drive it. And so I'm really excited about where we will see our entire region, and indeed the entire state, move over the course of the next decade.
I agree with you, Matthew. As always, I appreciate your contributions. Those are the 10 top trends that we see influencing the housing market and our industry here at the midpoint of 2025, in the midpoint of this decade. As always, you can follow us on social media and stay tuned to future broadcasts with the FutureCast Forum. Matthew,
My friend,
always a pleasure.
Likewise.
Thank
take
you
care.
so much.